Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Season 6, Episode 11 of the Voiro Podcast. And true to our theme that we started with Leslie DeMont that we had in our last episode, which I'm still getting over because Lena didn't warn me and I had to read an entire book, but it was a great episode. We are on the same AI route. We are still eating, drinking, breathing AI right now. I know everybody's all about AI. Some people are dissing it. Some people are all about it. We're in the Chat GPT 5 era. There's so many things that are happening, and there's definitely a race to include AI into our lives, into the technology that we have as companies. When you think about AI in general, we've been waiting for so long for it to come about, to be so accessible. It's no surprise that all of us are kind of grabbing onto it with both our hands. When you think about media companies and AI, the first thing that comes to your mind is generative AI, right? But today I have two of my colleagues, Deven Shah, who is the PM for AI at Voiro, and I have Ankit Richariya, who is the head of engineering at Voiro, to also talk about where else AI can be applied and how we are doing it at Voiro. So welcome to you both to the Voiro Podcast.
Hello,
Thank
guys.
you. Hello, guys. Thanks, Kavita, for having us today.
You're most welcome. All right. So just before we get into this, in terms of generative AI, when I talk about generative AI and media companies, right, the first thing that comes to our mind is creating copy, creating content, creating videos, creating art, and so on and so forth. But when you look at the way media companies operate today, everything is so fragmented, right? Where we watch content is fragmented, what we watch is fragmented. Within the same household, there are so many things that people are watching at the same time in different rooms on different devices. So if you just look at what's happening under the hood for companies who are creating content, for whom they have to make money from this content, it starts to look even more fragmented, right? You have direct sales, indirect sales, programmatic sales, ad sales, subscription sales, transaction on video sales. You name it, you have it, right? And the fun part about content is that you can monetize it 7 ways to Sunday. But the point is that you have to make sense of it as an organization, and that's pretty much where Voiro comes in. We help media organizations and content creation organizations make sense of their ad revenue in a single workflow that's able to connect all the various players on the monetization workflow for them to be able to understand their data and also be able to perform better at their jobs. So last year, same time, we decided that we have to get onto this AI bandwagon, right? And at that point in time, we had a slightly larger product team and we were messing around with a whole bunch of things. So, Deven, from your perspective, right, how did we start? What happened? It's been a year. It's been a year since, we have, we kind of made this journey, right? So, how did we get here? What happened along the way, right? And first and foremostly, how did we decide to do the first thing that we needed to do at AI? Because there were so many things, there were so many choices that we had, right? So how did we decide?
So when we first began our journey into AI, we were at a crossroad. We had, on one hand, we could do AI Copilot. On the other hand, we could do a data analytics. So both had its own use cases. Both had some powerful use cases that we could take on. But then we realized that data is a king in advertising industry. And we had organized data. So what we did is we realized that every advertiser, brand, publisher, all of them need data to get the information all out of it. But to get the data, they need to know the data. They need to know the context. They need to know what is agency, what is advertiser, what is delivered revenue, what is eCPMs, what are discounting, right? So there are two options. We could go with data analytics. We could go with Copilot. We thought, let's go with something which is familiar, which is easy, and we have organized data. Let's just try that. So that's how we started with our journey as a AI data analytics solution. And what we realized that when we start with AI, right, you do not have to know the context, industry context, as an end user. As an end user, when you say that, I just want discounts over now 6 months. Now, AI understands what discount percentage is in the ad tech industry. Okay. So when we started building it, what we realized that it's very much important for us to give that AI the industry knowledge. Here it comes when, for example, when you say impression, it is not the impression of you're on a certain object, but in ad industry, it is ad impression. So that's how we started training our model. That's why we decided that, hey, let's go with this data analytics route. There's something helpful. People are looking for something like that, where they don't want to, they just want their data. They just know what they want. But they don't want to know how to get it, where we have to pull 5-6 reports and to do all this analysis, all of that. So when we are looking at that, we are like, okay, it's much familiar, it's trustworthy. First thing, when we start building an AI, we have to make sure that the users trust this data. Right? Trust your analytics. If we had started with the co-pilot, people might have not trusted the decisions that we are taking because there's nothing to back that at that time. But with AI, you could do that, get this data same by using some reports, analyzing, spending 5 hours, you can get the same data. But you can also get the same report by just querying and saying that, hey, can you give me discounts over now 6 months?
Yeah, so I wanted to interrupt, right? I know that we're sitting in the same room, so we're like both struggling with this mic and like mute and unmute ourselves and everybody else. So whoever's listening to us, bear with us if you have some problems with the sound. But I'm hoping that Santosh and Gautam in post are going to make us sound amazing. So look, from what I understand, right, when last year at October, when we started this journey, you were at a crossroad, right? We're essentially a workflow automation platform. Okay. And the easiest thing was for us to make sure that there are some instruction-based tasks that would be carried out. But we made the bold decision of going ahead on the data analytics piece because we also realized that people on the workflow all needed analytics to be a co-pilot for them to do their jobs better.
Correct.
And what you were talking about, when you were saying they just want their data, they just wanted answers so that they could get on with their day, right? And earlier it was somebody would pick up the phone, talk to their favorite ops guy and say, what are my campaigns looking like today? Or did this XYZ campaign go live? My inbox is all backed up. Or somebody wants to take something live and so on and so forth. So these questions are all now available in terms of actual answers that you decided to give each of your users, right? Yeah. But I do remember when we finally started working on it, you had a lot of chaos and confusion because we confused you as well in the middle. We started asking you for things because the AI world started to move very fast. And overnight, you had to change and make a lot of changes. So talk about where you started in terms of how you started to approach the problem of data analytics and with an AI analyst, and what are the problems that you found in there, and how did you actually circumvent them and tackle them?
So when we started this journey, we decided that let's go with data analytics and all of that. So what we decided that, hey, what are most used dimensions, what most used metrics, and most used filters that people have. Filters can be your time filter, your any regional filter, advertiser filter, and all of that. But when we realize that in ad tech industry, right, there are limited number of metrics. There can be delivered revenue, delivered impression, eCPMs, CTR, VTR, all of that. Those. But dimensions are also somewhat limited. It's finite. It's not more than 30, 35 right now. Okay, with 35 dimensions, with let's say 8 or 10 metrics, and over that there are filters. So we created an XYZ system that we call internally, where we know that there can be n number of permutation combination using those. So we started training AI on the metrics, and we started saying that, hey, for this particular metrics, there could be so many dimensions. And this is how we slowly started understanding the data. Now, this became very chaos. When I went to Ankit, he's like, oh, what is this, right? So then what we started doing is like, okay, let's look at 5 most used dimension metrics. In our case, it's more about how much I delivered, what was my eCPMs, and how is my advertiser performing, how is my agency performing, am I going to deliver the campaign, or what else list. So I went with Ankit saying that, hey, these are the 5 things that we want, these are the dimensions that we. So when we started building, people started asking that, hey, can I do this? Can I do that? Someone said, hey, can I do arithmetic operations on this? Can I do all of that? So that's when we were like, okay, let's look at. Someone asked like, hey, can I ask about ad impressions here? Can I ask the definition about DFP, what DFP does? How will DFP help? Someone asked me like, hey, can I ask what does Voiro do? What is need in Voiro? What is line item in Voiro? I want to teach everyone. Right, so we were in the middle of this, like, hey, we're trying to figure out. Sales is coming with their own requests, marketing has their own requests, UIs have their own requests, users have their own requests. So, as a product, as a PM, we just wanted to realize that, hey, what are we doing? What is the end goal? So we started talking to our users, and we realized that, hey, apart from this impression, first they start with a curiosity. AI is always about curiosity. But when they started asking questions, they started formulating a story. I literally sat with the user and I saw that they started writing a story like, okay, these are my ad revenue now, make it by salesperson, make it by agency. Then they were like, okay, can I get ECPMs over a time? So I like, okay, this is the derived metrics. I mean, okay, how do we do that? We trained our AI to do all of that. So in that middle of all of this, we realized there's agentic AI coming in. Okay. And that's when we had to change our system from instruction based to agentic AI.
So, okay, so let's, considering that this podcast is all about simplifying complex matters, right?
Yeah.
What is the difference between agentic AI and Gen AI?
So, let's say there are two types of AI. One is your normal AI that you have, and second is the agentic AI. When you talk about agentic AI, it is more autonomous. When I say, and it's not just autonomous, it is controlled autonomous. I'll tell you why it is controlled autonomous, but it is autonomous. It can behave, it can answer a certain questions behalf of the user. It can take decisions, it can take actions behalf of the user. And on the other hand, passive AI, which we call as a normal AI, which merely responds to a pre-programmed instruction. So whatever you want to give them instruction to write in a code. And agentic AI, you don't have to write everything on the code. You just have to train. You just have to tell them that, hey, this is what your job is. So one of the major thing that agentic AI has are the tools. They have access to tools. When I say tools, it can be your databases. It can be anything. For example, it can be a weather API. It can be your internal database. You can connect anything to it. But you have to write properly to tell them, hey, when do you call that tool? There's a tool calling optimization that has to happen to you. So I'll give you a very simple example between agentic AI and a passive AI. Okay, let's say you are at a restaurant and you're just visited a restaurant website and you just want to order something. If it was a passive AI, it will ask you that, hey, you say that, hey, can you press 1 for the menu? It will give you a menu. Then it will say that, oh, okay, you ordered last time this, you can, do you want to do this? Because it's pre-programmed. In the day you have ordered this, let's do that. That is how a normal passive AI will work, where you pre-program everything, you can want to order something done. But in agentic AI, the difference here is, let's say this agentic AI has access to weather API. It has access to your time, it has access to your internal database, everything. Now, when you come to this website and it is cold outside, so it will recommend you saying that, hey, last time you ordered large pizza, but since it is cold outside, why don't you order a hot chocolate along with it? So it is asking a user based on the weather, based on the time of the day and all of that, it is asking the user that, hey, why don't you it's recommended. It's like more of a smart waiter. What will they do when they are outside? Like, hey, you did this, why don't you add this? This is a major difference between the passive AI and the agentic AI. But there is one more thing, the controlled autonomy. When I say controlled autonomy, you can't let all the decisions be taken by agentic AI. For example, what if they place order without even confirming? Then it is not right? We just placed it without user's confirmation. Or what if they just randomly send someone hot chocolate, saying that, oh, I made this decision, they might be hungry about it. So that's when it comes to control autonomy, where you limit certain things, saying that, hey, these are your limitations. Can't do this stuff.
Okay, so we've heard a lot from Deven, right?
Yeah.
And in a company, in a tech company, if the product managers are dreamers, right? The people who actually make those dreams come true are the engineers, right? And I know that Ankit has a lot to say about the journey as well, because it has been quite a heated and heated conversation-led journey. There's been a lot of friction. There has been a lot of searching and validation and so on and so forth. So, as head of engineering, Ankit, you had a huge task, right? One is obviously, I was impatient to get this out, right? I genuinely wanted to plant the flag. And so I was like, get anything out. I want to make sure that in my first quarter, we are going to all our agencies and we actually have a demo of this. The second point was the fact that our brief kept changing. Deven kept reacting to this brief. It was very exciting as a time because, it was an open canvas and we were actually trying to figure out how to paint it. So product and product management, product thinking, and creation of the features and all of these things are one part of it. But then the important part of when you're running a company like ours, been in business for the last 10 years, right? You want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. And we were dealing with data that customers already had, that we had organized for customers over the last 7-8 years. So based on all of these parameters and the fact that we could not fail at this, no pressure here, How did you think about the cognitive architecture of Voiro Genie as it is today, with the vision of it being robust and playing with the rules that our customers are used to playing within? And what is your thought process? And if you could tell our listeners what kind of architecture did you put into place, and how will that hold us in good stead as we go along?
Yeah, so I think Deven gave like a good background story of how it started, and like Kavita, you were mentioning that it just kept on changing, which is a general software building trend that dreamers dream will change, and it will keep getting optimized on a daily basis, right? As engineers and especially as leads of these teams, right? I think the job at hand that I had was to make sure that we are targeting the right problem, right? And because we were entering the AI space for the first time, there was one thing that I was really focused on, which was the negatives, right? Positives is something that everybody will talk about. Like business team had an outcome to achieve, Deven had a list of outcomes to achieve. But there were like some things that I was continuously, in touch with the AI space, wherein I knew the problems that the customers are facing in general in the media industry. Plus, like let's say with tools like ChatGPT and all coming up, there were like some general problem that I was seeing with AI, right? And generally what we do is we put all of these things under a governance layer, wherein let's say that uh, if you're building a software, what you will do is you will put a governance layer on that software so that you have control over data, right? What we did is that we focused on the first important part, which was the problem generally in the industry, which is data control, right? And privacy. But when I say privacy, what it means is that even if you go to any company as of today and you ask them that we are building an AI software, would you come on board, right? They will be very like easy. They'll be like, oh yeah, nobody will have a clear answer, right? But what is the real problem? Because data is something, it's a game changer. Like if you go to an advertiser, an agency or a publisher, data is something that everybody wants to be very careful about. And with my expertise in this industry, because I've been working with Voiro for the last 9 years, I had seen that not only externally, I have seen that internally in the companies itself, within the team's data is something that is extremely important and extremely private, right? So what we focused on was that we need to make sure that whenever this interaction of data is happening, the data cannot leave the premise, right? Hence, I would like to use two terms in our cognitive architecture. One of which is data control, and second is the governance layer, right? When we say data control, what I mean is that whenever an interaction is happening, so let's take a quick example, right, to understand this better. Like Deven was saying, right, that you can ask AI, which is our genie, that can you give me eCPM for the last 1 month, right? What will that do? It will, we have built a layer wherein Genie will query our API structure, and that API structure will give you the response, right? This is a very simple, layman term definition that I can give. But what happens in the background, right?
Just 1 minute. That's not layman term, Ankit. You've spoken. You've dropped 3 acronyms. You've used the word API, so it's definitely not. So basically, you're saying when you are talking about what happens when I ask a question like, "What is the average cost of my ad?" which is what is eCPM, right? You are saying that question is made in English. I'm asking it in English, and it takes certain routes internally, which is called certain kinds of data calls, which you are calling APIs, and it goes and fetches back this data and tells you this information again in English. It's like me asking you a question and you answering that question to me, and it's as simple as that, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't.
Yes.
You're telling me at this point in time, it doesn't go outside anywhere to answer that question. How is that possible?
No. So how we did a lot of R&D on this, and when we were brainstorming, right, we actually started with like, let's say, intent based AI. Then like Deven is saying, we actually converted it completely to agentic workflow, right? But while we were trying this out, what we did is that we layered our architecture, right? When I say layering, what it means is that uh, Genie is one part of the, that ecosystem. Then there are AI models, the second layer, and then there is the logical layer, which is our APIs, right? And what we did is this, that whenever Genie is asking, let's say you as a user will ask a question on Genie, What Genie will do is Genie will, go to the second layer, which is the AI model, which will confirm that what is the kind of data you're looking for, right? Which is the AI training and the right data, or, connecting it to this user question, because you may ask one question, but there can be related terms, ecosystems, right? So that's where we changed the game, that we went to the third layer, wherein we said, okay, now when the question comes to Voiro, instead of publishing this data onto the platform where the Genie, or let's say this agentic workflows are hosted, we kept the data on our side, and we kept the communication on the API front. So now what happens is that when we're sending the response, Genie receives natural language as the question and gives back answer again in the natural language, correct? So the data again stays with Voiro, right? And then the answer that is going back is that normal English, plain English answer that is going back. Hence, what we did is, because of this API level communication that we are handling, we gave the answer here itself. Data went back to our premise, and then the answer went back to Genie. So this is how we made sure that data stays on Voilo's premise, right? Now there is a second layer, and very important layer in our industry.
1 minute. When you say on-premise, you don't mean actual on-premise, right? You mean on the virtual private
On
cloud
Voiro, yes,
premise.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So just to rephrase what you just said, right? So from what I understand, the learning is part of the Voiro algorithms, in which what Deven mentioned in the past, or in the past couple of minutes, saying that, we created a dictionary of sorts where we are
Yes.
able to translate all of these words, acronyms, etc., to be able to get this AI to understand what does it mean, right? So it can
Yes.
fetch this data back from wherever it is stored, which at this point in time for every one of our customers is stored on their own virtual private clouds.
Yes.
Now, to make sense of it and for it to be translated back to our user as an answer, we are using AI to understand that information and bring it back to you in natural language.
Yes.
It's almost like, I used to have a colleague earlier who, I swear, whenever I used to speak, it used to be white noise for him. And then every time I used to say something, he would ask the other colleague, what did she say? And then that person would tell him what I said, right? It's almost like you are translating to somebody else in a way that you can understand what was said in terms of an answer, right? While the answer would come back as an SQL query or as a table or whatever else, an English-based answer would come back using AI, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
All of this happening without leaving our virtual private cloud of the customer.
Yes.
Okay.
And then, Kavita, the second most important problem that we were solving, right? And the reason, again, what generally happens is that data privacy comes under governance layer, right? But because this is such a big problem, we separated this out from the governance layer and we tackled this problem separately. Then we went on to the second problem, which is governance layer, right? Now, in our industry, what happens is attribution of data, permissions is something that is extremely important, right? If it is like, let's say, call it any big agency or any big publisher, right? What happens is that there can be n number of teams, or let's say smaller teams in a bigger team, right? So what is the bigger challenge in that sort of team structure is this, that how do you get the right data to the right person, and how do you roll up the data correctly, right? Again, our logical layers and our expertise comes into the picture, and we built, let's say, attribution layers. We built logical layers that can define these outputs, right? And then we were able to deliver the result, correct, accurate results to the accurate team. So let's say if Deven is in product, or let's say for an example's sake, let's see that Deven heads a team of FMCG vertical, right? And he would have multiple other sales leads under him, and they will have multiple salesperson under him, right? What will happen is, if you start from the bottom, the sales team 1 will get the outputs only for that team. Whatever data is for sales team 2, it will never get mixed up, right? So that is what the second problem we were seeing in the industry, that how do you control that the right data is delivered to the right team at the right time. So that's what we did with our governance layer. And again, that was a simpler problem for us because it's something that we already are, experts at, and we have already solved these problems on our platform. So we tied that with our logical layer, which was the layered architecture I was talking about, and hence we were able to solve this problem as well.
Right. And what about scalability at the end of the day, right? Because this is just the start of a whole bunch of stuff that you're doing. So, you spoke about control, you spoke about attribution, you spoke about permission, right? The last part is obviously scalability. And that's something that everybody is shaking in their boots about, because nobody wants to have some insane AWS bill, right? Although, although, it is an expensive feature to have, but how do you ensure scalability over here and still make it possibly cost effective?
Yeah. So if you look at if you again go back to our conversation about, communication that we were having, Genie to AI model and then to Voiro API, right? What we did is that because it's a layered architecture, the foundation is made such that it is extensible. So for example, if tomorrow we have to get into, let's say, action based or let's say workflow automation based, tool that is still powered by a Genie, right? Again, what will happen is that the logical layer that I was talking about at Voilo's end, it is like a brain. So when you say cognitive architecture, it's just like your brain, right? You receive the information, you solve the problem, you learn from it, and you make sure that you remember it, right? That's how your brain functions. So we are trying something of the same sort of, architecture internally, wherein, let's say, when you go to the second phase of, let's say, workflow automation, it's just a different part of your brain that you're activating, right? So you're not rebuilding everything. Your foundation remains the same. You will activate one extra part, attach that as an input, and then in the logical layer, and then it will receive information. It will solve the problem. It will remember it, and it will send back the response. So hence, we can go. Let's say today we are talking about workflow automation. Tomorrow we can, maybe like talk more about more user control. It is all a function of attaching these, extra capabilities to that layered architecture I was talking about, and you can just keep extending. So you can, like in terms of infrastructure, we call it, horizontal scalability. That's how you can consider our infra as well.
Okay. Thanks, Ankit. All right. So, Deven, while Ankit has spoken a little bit about the future as well, which we will come to, just to wrap up what Ankit just said, right? Basically, we are the insight that we decided to sort of attack and service at our customers is that they were afraid of losing control, right? And we ensured that the control always remained in their hands. Even though they were using new technology like AI, it was not going to run away from them, right? So taking a step into the future, I know that we spoke about AI-based analytics or a conversational AI bot that you're able to ask questions on. And, sky's the limit in terms of the imagination as to what can be done on this part. What next for Genie, given that we are in a fairly boxed environment, right? So what next for Genie? I mean, dream aloud a little bit for our listeners as well.
Yeah. So I'll start with very simple, like I'm just going to take baby steps and I will tell you what we are facing right now, issue and what we're trying to solve. So one of the problems that we are facing is the latency. Though it is a 20 seconds, when it takes 20 seconds to answer, but it's still as a user experience like, oh, it's taking there, right? So we're trying a lot of things, like we're trying to cache it and all, but again, the caching comes with a problem of cache poisoning. If you ask a question, I store it, and again you ask, as Alina asks us, and again, you cannot show that same answer to same person, right? So when I'll start with how it worked and how it started, then I'll try to give you a futuristic approach. So when we first started, like Ankit said, we started with the user attributions and all of that. Then we realized when we were trying to build it, it was an instruction based. We moved to agentic AI base. And the agentic AI base, we realized that we need at least 3 databases. One is our internal reporting. We need ad tech knowledge. Third is a product knowledge that we need. So after that, once it happened that way, now we are at that layer where we are like, okay, now what people need is more and more insight. What we are trying to work right now is that we have all this data. We want to give a user that these are top 5 things that you should be looking at. So two definition of agentic AI will come there, where I give you 5 suggestions that you should be looking at today. So you start a day saying that, hey, these are the 5 things I should be looking at. And based on that, you take action. So now the next step that we are trying to do here is analyze all this data, figure out, okay, what is a top 5 analysis I can give, try recommending it on our product. Like it's there. We have made a design which shows like the top 5 things that you should be looking at today. So try clicking it. And now this is where actually agentic AI is, right? You are actually telling that, hey, these are the 5 things you should be looking at. So your day, you're just looking at those 5 things and your day gets over. Like this week, this campaign is under delivering, I need to take action. It also recommend you the action. And that's we are trying to store and say that, hey, whether it recommended right or if it recommended wrong. So I think next 2-3 years, it's where it's going to be like agents. I always say that it's going to be agents talking to an agent, trying to figure out, trying to take a campaign live. But yeah, this is where I see the ad operations revenue. It's not about replacing ad operations, but ad operation will do more creative work on top of this. So that is where I see this going.
So I think one of the things that you spoke about was cache poisoning as well as latency, right? Both of these things are a little more complex for even when I was thinking about it. When you say latency, it is an industry standard and everybody's facing this problem in trying to kind of make sure that this kind of comes back up. And the more generic solution to most of the things that we see in the IT space is that if something is getting delayed, you just store a little bit in the back end and then push it forward, like almost preparing. You see this also happening in e-commerce, right? Where they have your often bought products that are situated closer to you in your locality. Even when you look at content distribution networks, right? Often used content or called in content are stored in server units that are closer to the geography or the person or the kind of people who are calling in that kind of content, right? So caching, making it available, and having all of these clever ways of making it easily available with the shortest distance always existed. But with AI, especially in where we are in, which is AI analytics, two different people could be asking questions in which the time lapse actually impacts the information that's going to be generated, which means that caching will definitely poison the output, right?
Yeah.
So I think we've had an extremely interesting discussion today. It has been filled with acronyms, the 3-letter acronyms and more, lots of tech conversation that has happened. But essentially the flavor that I want to leave our listeners with is that, 2 years ago, trying to build an AI application was dedicated to somebody who actually understood an LLM, right? Yes. Who had computing power or a deep war chest that would really sort of bankrupt you, and you were doing things that were going to change the world, right? And you really needed to understand a lot about AI. Today, building an AI application has become far easier to access, but context is deeply, deeply important because what you get AI to do needs to be not just gimmicky, but actually useful and helpful to the user, right? We see a future where every one of us will have a co-pilot. We'll have a professional co-pilot, we'll have a domestic co-pilot, we'll have co-pilots everywhere. They may not be in forms of robotic dogs or Irona type, like in the Archie's comics where somebody's roaming around your house. We anyway have Roombas around our house right now, but they're not going to be humanoids in the future, but more into your phone, right? Everything that's packed in a way that is implicit to your life. It's almost an extension to yourself. So I'm very excited that we are able to sort of contribute to this because one of the big things about being a SaaS company as well as providing technology to our users is that we want to ensure that at all points in time, every one of our Voiro users has access to the latest and greatest in terms of technology that is applicable to their workflow. So today, each and every one of our Voiro users have access to possible amazing co-pilot that they can design for themselves and be better at their jobs. And that's all thanks to the fact that you're thinking about it. Ankit is making sure it comes to life and that our users are constantly providing us feedback to make it better. So if any of you all have questions on how we built this, what were our learnings, if you want to also compare what you are doing and if you have problems you want to sort of discuss and ratify, Deven is available on LinkedIn as well. We'll put in his LinkedIn profile in the show notes, and so is Ankit. And yeah, they'll be happy to talk to you. I know I'm committing for them for on their behalf, but I'm sure they'll be happy to talk to you. You'll find them in any AI event that they're currently skulking around, and I'm sure that they attend. But thank you everybody for listening. It has been an interesting episode, and I hope to see you next episode where we have a lineup of several amazing women in tech that are coming up. Thank you, Deven, as well as Ankit, for taking the time out today. Thank you, Santosh, Gautam, and Leena for producing the episode. Thank you, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you.